Welcome to this new Coding with the Hub video. Today we are building a feature for Alfresco repository which will allow extracting email attachments and creating new nodes in Alfresco repository with the content of these attachments. The feature will be built by using both Alfresco SDKs, the in-process SDK based on Maven and the out-of-process SDK based on events. Let's move on to the details so you can determine the best option for you. In Alfresco repository, out of the box, mail files are stored as they are, in a single repository node that includes information about the body of the emails and their attachments. Some enterprise add-ons, such as the Outlook connector, add features to this default behavior. For those users, this development is not recommended. However, if you are using Community or Enterprise Edition with no enhancements, this add-on will allow you to extract mail attachments and to store them as separate nodes in the Alfresco repository. For example, for an email with 2 attachments, you will get one node with the email body and 2 additional nodes with the files attached to it. It's time to get our hands dirty with the Alfresco in-process SDK, and Java and Spring fun is on its way. Building this feature using the Alfresco Maven SDK requires creating a jar file to be deployed inside the Alfresco repository web application. And in this case, we are using the Maven Alfresco platform jar archetype to develop a behavior listening to the creation of new nodes. Note that our code will be executed by the Alfresco repository every time a new node is created, inside the database transaction that is actually creating the node. For this reason, we need to be sharp to identify if the new node requires attachments extraction, and we need to be extra careful to avoid breaking the file creation due to some unexpected exception in our code. As an alternative, the feature can be built using the Alfresco Java SDK. In this case, it's not required to deploy any jar file to the repository. We are creating a Spring Boot application that is consuming repository events from the Active queue. And when a creation event is detected, the application will identify if that requires attachment extraction. And it will update the Alfresco repository using the REST API. Note that our code will be executed outside the Alfresco repository once the transaction has been committed to the database. Since we are not affecting directly ingestion performance, we need to take care of the REST API calls generated to create the email attachments. Once we understand these approaches, let's move on the first one, onto the Maven project. Before creating the extension, we are going to check that the out-of-the-box behavior for the Alfresco repository is this one. So we are uploading an email and no attachments are extracted. For that, I have a regular Docker compose running on my local. So I'm going to access, for instance, to the share UI. And we are going to upload that message, that ELN message, to verify that the behavior is just to create that node, but not to extract these attachments. So we are logging in share. We are going to use like the share folder, for instance, just only to verify this is the out-of-the-box attachment, and we are uploading this email file, and we can see that the file is created, and we even have some metadata associated from, to, and this kind of data, but the attachments are not created in the Alfresco repository. So we have clear that we need to add a feature to the out-of-the-box Alfresco, and this is what we are going to do on the following steps. We are developing the first version of this add-on by using the Alfresco Maven SDK, and we are going to use the behavior policies extension point. With that, we are going to build the package, and we are going to deploy that as a jar library in the Alfresco web application, so we can have this feature on the Alfresco deployment. You have all the details of the Alfresco SDK in process tool in the official Alfresco documentation. And the first thing you need to check if that all your requirements are preset in your developer environment. So you need Java 11, that's fine. You need also Maven install. You need some Docker and also some Docker Compose. So once everything is ready in our environment, we can create the Alfresco project using this filter for the Maven archetype. And in this case, we are going to choose the Alfresco platform jar archetype, as this is the one that is required to develop behaviors. You can choose some group ID, artifact ID, and so on. And with that, you have the initial boilerplate in order to build an Alfresco add-on that it's going to be deployed on the Alfresco web applications. Since we already did that, we can just go to this project, to this Alfresco all attachments GitHub project, and we can clone the project locally. So we are cloning the project. We have all the source code developed, and we are going to use the behavior policy extension point. With that extension point, you are able to react to some events that are happening in the Alfresco repository. In our case, we are just listening to the node service policies on create node. Every time a node is created in the repository, we are able to add some code to the default, to the out-of-the-box behavior. You have, all the different documentation for the behavior policies in the official Alfresco documentation. And in our case, we have the product. We can just build the project. We are going to create a jar file that should be deployed on the Alfresco repository. We are going to copy this target Alfresco Outlook attachments to our Docker. We are using the default Alfresco Docker installer generator. So this is the deployment folder, and we can just start this Docker with our deployed add-on just to see what happens. In the meantime, we can open the project to inspect all the details of this implementation. You can use IntelliJ IDEA or some other ID you prefer, and we can open this project as a Maven project, and we are going to see the details of this implementation. So I was creating the project as a Maven archetype, so it's the same thing we did before, but all the changes are already incorporated. So we have the resources folder. In this folder, we are creating some customization for the project. The first one is the MIME type we are accepting, so this should be email MIME times. We have also some options in order to create this attachment in the same folder of the email or in a different folder of the email that is coming. After that, we can go to the Spring Beans declaration. We have the behavior that is implemented in this class with an initialization method and also with some properties that are coming from the Alfresco global properties. And we have also a handler for the extraction of attachments from an email that is this other Spring Bean. If we move to the implementation, we can see the behavior. This behavior is implementing the node services on create node policy. On the initialization, we are declaring a new Java behavior that is listening to every time a transaction commit happens. So every time a node is created, we are going to execute this method. You can also specify a filter for the types of nodes you want to listen to. In this case, we are listening to every content created in the repository, and we are just getting the node that has been already created. We are checking if the MIME type is in the list we are expecting, and after that, if everything is fine, we are going to extract all the attachments with this attachment extractor class that is including all the logic for the by using the Java email library, and it's extracting the emails and creating the right associations for it. At this point, the folder and also for the files. And after that is creating all these nodes or these attachments in the repository. So it's quite simple. So just implement the behavior, listen to the model or to the content model, to the type you want to filter, and if the filter is fine, then you can just apply your action. If that was ready, and I guess so, we can go back to, for instance, Alfresco Serve, and we can perform again the same test we did before. So we are going to upload an email file, and we are expecting to have all the attachments on a different folders since we were using this separate property. So now if we upload exactly the same email we had before, we are expecting to have all the attachment created in a separate folder. Remember that this will happen in the same transaction used to create the email. So this is something that you need to control. If you are just throwing some exception, if you are creating something that stops the program to work, then the file won't be uploaded at all to the Alfresco repository. So be careful with that. We have again, we had already this email from before. We are going to remove that. Remember that this created only the node with the email, and now we have exactly the same thing. We have the sample email with the metadata, but we have also a folder that has been created with the attachments that were inside this message. So this was working as expected. We created a behavior in order to extract the attachment from email files by using that Alfresco SDK in process. And we are doing this work while this node is created in the repository. That was successful. So let's move to the next approach. The second approach to implement this feature is using the Alfresco Java SDK, the out-of-process SDK. For this development, we are going to build an Spring Boot application that is consuming events from the ActiveMQ broker. Once we have the right conditions for it, we are going to update the repository by using the REST API. So we don't need to deploy anything to this out-of-the-box Alfresco. We can just run this application from the command line or using some Docker container or whatever you prefer. The official documentation is including all the details for this SDK, and since we don't have a Maven archetype for that, you can check the Alfresco Java SDK project, and on this samples folder, you will find this extension template. So you can start with that and add your changes to this. So I'm just doing that, but the first thing you need to note is that we are using the active enqueue broker. So you need to be sure that this port is open in your Docker Compose or in your deployment, so we can consume these events from our application. So this is out of the box Alfresco started with this open port, and we can clone the project we have on this Alfresco Outlook attachments out of process. So we can clone the code that was built by using this extension template, and we can inspect what we did in order to build the extension in this other way. So let's open the project. This out of process project, that is a Maven project. We have some properties in order to add the communication with the repository and with the broker. So we are accessing the ActiveMQ broker by using this host and port. This is why we open this port. And we have also the access to the REST API by using some credentials, some host and port, and this is the default root path for the REST API. We are implementing the application. This is the default starting class for the Spring Boot application. And we are implementing the onNode create event handler. So we provide the event filter. In this case, we are only taking care of the messages that are from an email main type, the message and the application. That was the same we had before. And we are also implementing the handle event. So every time a node is created, and if that is filtered, if that is something that is an email, we are going to read the content of the email. We are building the main message in order to create the attachments. So we are creating the attachment folder in the same way, but in this case we are using the REST API in order to create the folder and also to create the association that is related to this specific folder. And for every attachment, we are also creating the node with the REST API, updating the content with the REST API, and updating the right association again with the REST API. So in this case, we are listening to this kind of message, and when that message happens, we are creating all the required information by using the REST API. So in order to run that, yes, we are going to build again the project. We have that running Alfresco, waiting for it. And we can just run this as a command line application. So the application is starting at this point, and we are now listening. The application started, and we are now listening to events happening on the repository. So let's go back again to the share web application, and we are going to perform exactly the same operation. So we are going to upload an email, and we are going to see if that is working as expected. So in this case, we are expecting to have a new folder with the attachments on it and with the right associations for every of the nodes that have been already created. So again, we are going to upload this sample email to the SAR files. And you can note this is different from the previous one. So only the attachment has been created, and our code is reacting to the event, and after the original node has been created, some other nodes with the folder and the attachment are created. So this is a bit different, the result from the previous one, but in the end is exactly the same thing. So with that, we got our feature implemented by two different ways. So you can choose what is better for you. But again, I hope that was helpful. And let's see on next videos. Bye.